Welcome to my class in Ukrainian egg decorating. As some of you know me, you know that this is one of my favorite ways to celebrate Easter with my friends and family. It's a craft that I learned in 4-H about 32 years ago. As I see here, my first egg that I made was in 1989. And I learned the craft to be able to teach other people how to do the craft. So I was teaching 4-H kids, and I was also working with the extension homemakers, and I taught classes through adult and community education, and I've just enjoyed teaching this craft to people because it's very easy and it's a nice way to gather together to celebrate Easter holiday together. And so I'm going to show you a couple different techniques, but the main one that we're going to do is the wax resist method. So let's start with a couple basics. The writing tool that you're using is called a kistka. And if you ordered a kit from the ladies in the Ukrainian gift shop in Minneapolis, Minnesota, you will have gotten a kit that has a basic kiska. It's the original wooden one with the copper funnel and wiring. And you would have gotten a couple packets of dyes, and I've made up those couple that you probably got in your kit, the light blue, the pink, the yellow. And I've added black because I want to show you something special to do with black. So the writing tool was the kiska, and plural would be writing tools, or kiski. So we'll get a little bit of a language lesson while we're doing this. You also would have gotten a cube of beeswax. Might look like this. It might look, grab my box of wax here, like a square. And it should be yellow. And what happens when we use the flame for this craft, it will turn the wax black on the egg. As you can see, I've already started an egg here to be able to show you some things, and so the wax is going to turn black because that's the carbon burning. If you have an electric kiska, some of you are really into this, like I was for a long time. This one you plug in and the wax will stay warm indefinitely. You don't have to hold it over the flame. And so what you'll need for this, because you're not going to burn it over the flame, is a pre-colored wax. So you'll get a square of black wax, or you'll get strips of wax that you drop into the little funnel as you need it, and it will melt continuously. Just for fun, I'll show you. I took a week-long course at Davis and Elkins, their Appalachian Crafts Festival that they have every year. It's the Augusta Heritage Festival. They have 4 weeks of artisans and crafts people and musicians that come from all over to learn Appalachian crafts. And one of them that I took was Ukrainian eggs. And the lady that I took the class from made me this egg, gave this to me. And she also provided us with a jumbo kiska, which is very fun to work with. But the copper funnel is still about the same size, so you have a nice handle to work with, but the funnel will still make a nice fine line of wax. And while we're talking about the different sizes of lines with your kiska, know that you can get different sizes and they're color coded. And so I believe it's the red one that has the largest line, and the blue one is the medium line, and the white one is the fine line. And these are Delrin kiskas because they're made of plastic. I like to use the traditional kiska, which is made of wood, and they also are color coded, but it's not on the handle, it's on the tip of the handle. And so you can see that this is a blue one. And this is the one that I like to work with the most. It just makes a nice line. This one's red, and so it's going to have a different width of wax. And I'll show you that in just a moment. So the first step is to make sure you have all your supplies. You're going to need your beeswax, you're going to need your kiska, you're going to need some eggs. And I prefer farm fresh eggs because they haven't been coated with anything to make them look pretty for the grocery store. And if there's anything on them, you can just rinse them off with a little bit of water and pat them dry. We don't do a lot of rubbing with our eggs. And part of the reason we don't want to do that is because if there is anything on them that would be waxy or that would cause the dyes not to absorb into the shell, we don't want to smear that on the egg. Hand oils will also do that, and so will things like if you have lotion on your hands. If you use tools like a rubber band, basic tools to mark lines off on your eggs, or if you use pencil, just be aware, don't erase with your pencil lines, because the rubber from the eraser will also keep the dye from penetrating. It will resist the dye, and that's the whole process. It's a wax and resist method. And so I'm going to show you the steps, but we'll go back to our language lesson. Paisanki are decorated eggs. If you have one decorated egg, it's a paisanka. Basic steps: wax. You're going to layer the wax onto your egg. You're going to dip it into a dye. You're going to put more wax on your dye in different designs, and then you just repeat that process until you get to the end of the final color that you want your background to be. So for example, this background is blue. For those WVU fans out there, my husband made this egg, so proof positive that people who don't consider themselves artists can do this craft. This one, I used just 2 colors. This was a tiny, this is a pullet egg. And so I used, it has sort of a beigeish background, and I used red first, made my designs. And then I finished it in black when I finished my designs that I wanted on there. And so that makes a nice background color. This one is also finished in black. This one has some black. It's also got a lot of red in it. You'll see a lot of reds and blacks in these eggs. You've probably seen them before and maybe didn't know what they were. This one's finished in purple, and these are faded. They're a little faded. You want to keep your eggs out of sunlight once you've decorated them. But they will fade sometimes over time, and these are blown out. So I'm going to show you the technique for that. But you can leave them intact. Don't have to blow them out, and they will, this one's not blown out, and it's partly waxed. And you can hear maybe it gets hard inside. It dries up over time. So you don't have to do anything to the eggs. These are fresh eggs. We're not going to hard boil these eggs. So you're going to wax, dye, and repeat. And then at the end, we're going to wax the ends of the egg. I'll show you how to do that so that you can blow the egg out if you choose to, or you can leave it intact. And then we're going to do a process of melting the wax off the egg so that you can see your intricate design. And at the very end, if you like, as you can see, these eggs are pretty shiny because I've put just a little dot of varnish, clear varnish on there, which you can get at the hardware store or craft stores, Michael's. You can even get spray varnish. But you can use that to protect your egg and to seal the pores of the egg so that they stay tighter, stay intact, keep the color on, and it makes the colors pop. And that's the last step. Let me show you a first thing to learn to do with this kiska. So I have a very short candle. You don't want a tall candle for this craft because you'll be holding your arm up over the flame. And so if you keep it short, you can keep your hand on the table. And when I heat the kiska, what I'm doing is heating the copper funnel that's going to hold the wax. So the wax is going to go into the little funnel, and this is how I do it. I can scrape it into the funnel like this. I can use this kind of like a paring knife and sort of scrape it in that way. And then I'm going to hold the kiska over the flame, and you don't hold it deep into the flame because one of the things that can happen, because this is wax and wood, you can catch your little kiska on fire, and sometimes the tip falls off when you do that. But if it does catch on fire, just blow it out. The key to the writing tool is to keep your kiska full of wax and keep it hot. And to practice first, I have newspapers underneath me. I'm practicing on the newspaper just to get a sense of how my kiska feels. How much wax do I need to make the lines that I desire? And so right now I'm just practicing. If I get too much wax and the wax gets too hot, I get a blob. Doesn't mean you can't make it into something if you get that on your egg, because you can. But generally speaking, if you can control your wax, you don't want to have big blobs. So what you want to do is learn how to move your kiska along, keep it moving, keep it full of wax, and keep the wax warm, but not so hot that it comes out in a blob. You also don't want it to cool off too much, because then what you get are broken lines. And sometimes that isn't a problem because you're making something small. on your egg. But if it is like that is too broken and I'm trying to make a nice long straight line, then that can mess me up. So you want to heat your Kiska, fill it with wax, heat it again and write. Heat it and write, heat it and write. It's just a practicing, it's a rhythm, it's kind of like dancing. Get your dance steps down. Now, I've taken some eggs out of the refrigerator. These are store-bought eggs because right now it's hard to find white farm eggs. I did find some brown farm eggs, and I'll show you what they can look like. But I started with some eggs from the store. And one of the things I'm going to do is, first of all, check my egg to make sure it's a good egg to work with, and I'll tell you what you're looking for. You're going to hold it up to the light and make sure there are no cracks in your eggs, and you'll see the crack as you turn your egg around. If there is light coming through your eggshell, you'll know that it's got either a weak place or a crack. If it does, you don't want to use that egg because the process of blowing it out could cause the egg to crack, and that's painful after you've done some work on a very, long process of waxing and dyeing and made a beautiful egg, and it cracks while you're blowing it. So you can also, if you're not sure, squeeze the top and the bottom of the egg to see if light starts to come through. If it does, there might be a weak place. It's not a crack yet, but you'll know if it's a crack and you squeeze, you might even break the egg. So that's how you'll know not to use it. This one looks fine. And I haven't washed the eggs. You can wash your eggs just by soaking them in a little bit of water, maybe even a little bit of vinegar. But remember, every time you do anything to the egg that involves liquid, you're weakening the shell. So if your egg has something on it that really needs to be washed off, just a little bit of water. And then you want to pat it dry. We don't rub the egg if we can help it. We're just patting it. The next step is to decide what type of pattern you want to make. And I'm showing you some basic divisions just for the purpose of learning how to do all different kinds of eggs. But really, we're going to do one pattern today. I'm going to teach you how to do a pattern. And it may end up looking similar to mine, or it may look very different. And that's okay. It happens. But these are basic divisions. And the reason you want to think of your eggs in divisions is because you want to work in small spaces at a time. So just let's take this very simple first design. It's just vertically dividing my egg in half. So I would just take my Kiska, I would heat the wax, and I would start writing on my egg all the way around, straight line all the way around, divide it in half. That's a vertical divide. This one you can see is divided into fourths because I've done a vertical line, but I've also done a horizontal line. If we add the diagonal lines, then we have eighths. So it's just basically you're dividing your egg. And then you're going to work within those divisions. And that's how you make a very intricate looking egg. So for example, this egg is actually, it's pretty intricate. It's got some vines and dots and flowers and stripes and all kinds of things. But its basic division is this one, thirds. It's divided horizontally by 3 main lines. This one, again, looks pretty intricate when it's all said and done. And it's really this pattern, divided into eighths. And I worked within each of the sections to get that intricate design. If you do freeform, you can put anything wherever you want. This one, very intricate designs. And it looks like she used something like this to get her diamond shape. And keep in mind that just because it's divided that way doesn't mean you have to have actual lines. You can see that hers has this diamond shape, this diamond pattern, by dividing it into verticals first, a horizontal line around the center, and then she divided it also into a sort of a horizontal up and down line across the top and the bottom, but she didn't actually put the lines on there. She used it to guide her process, but she didn't actually do the lines. And so she's still got that nice diamond pattern, but without lines running through it. And I'll show you a little bit more about how to do that. Okay, so again, the process is wax, dye, wax, dye, wax, dye, until you get the pattern that you want and the background color that you like. You have probably done this before when you were a kid or with your kids. If you've written on an egg with a crayon and then dipped it into a color, and you'll see, it's like if you write your name, you'll see your name pop up in white, if you used a white egg, behind your waxy crayon, and the rest of your egg might be a color like pink or blue. So a couple different things about that. One is that the dyes that we're using are much more intense, and they're chemical, and you don't want to use these to make hard-boiled eggs and eat. So this is not a dye that you're going to use to create eggs that can be eaten. And so they're going to be much more intense. As you can see, you don't get these kinds of looks with your store-bought dyes. Those are vegetable-based dyes, and they're weaker, and they're water-soluble, and they will, they just look pretty pale. So that's one piece. The other piece is you want to make sure that you are working from lightest to darkest, because the concept is kind of like when you paint a wall. It's hard, for example, we have brown walls in our dining room. It would be hard to paint that wall a light creamy color or a yellow without some kind of primer. So you can't do a primer with eggs. Once you dye it a color, if you were to put this in dark blue or black first, you would not be able to do yellow over top of that. You would not see any yellow. So you start with the lightest. Yellow is light, pink is light, orange. I'll tell you a little bit about orange in a little bit, because that does something a little different with your egg. Light blue, light green, sort of medium shades. If you get into many colors, like if you saw on the website, you can do lots of colors. Light green, scarlet, a little different shade of red, a little deeper than the pink, and there's also a red. There's also a dark red, so you can get variations on that shade. Brick, just a little bit of a brownish red. And then there are also some darker colors: royal blue, turquoise, purple. Those are some of the darker ones. Brown. And then there are some special colors. Gold, that's pretty fancy. I didn't make up all the dyes this time because I want to keep it kind of simple just to show you the process, but you can get into it as little or as much as you like. So back to the process, you go from lightest to darkest, and whatever you put on your egg, and this is the difference between writing with a crayon. When you write on your Easter eggs with a crayon, you don't take the wax back off usually. You just crack the egg, hard-boiled egg open later and eat it, or you throw it away. This time, what we're going to be doing is taking the wax off completely so that you reveal an intricate design underneath. So the thing to remember is wherever you put wax on your egg, whatever the color the egg is underneath the wax, it will stay that color. So I have, for example, put some lines on this egg, and right now this egg is white. Everywhere that I have put lines, it will stay white because the wax will keep the dye from penetrating. So I'm just going to stick this in the yellow dye, and I'm just going to put it on a spoon. I put my finger on the top so that when I put it down into the jar of dye, then I'm just gently putting it in there, and it's going to soak for a little bit. Now, because these are store-bought eggs, this yellow may not get as vibrant as you'll see with chicken eggs from the farm, but we'll just see what happens. Let's let that soak for a little bit, and I'm going to start with a different concept. I'm going to drop this one. This is a completely white egg. I'm going to drop it into, let's do the blue, just to show you what this is going to look like. And we're just going to let those sit for a few minutes. And while those are sitting, let's get started on how to actually write on the egg. So you maybe, while I've been talking, practicing, you're putting wax into your Kiska, you hold it into the flame, and then you write and you practice. But now I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to put some on the egg. And remember, any place that I put wax on this egg right now is going to stay white. So I'm going to start with just a basic pattern. I'm going to use a pattern that was put with the basic die and Kiska set that you received. If you got a basic kit, you might have received a paper like this. You can see it's pretty well worn and used. This is a very old one. It's got dies all over it. And so I'm going to start with this basic division. As you can see, it's divided first into a vertical half and then a horizontal half that makes it into quarters. So let's just start with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my Kiska going. Yeah, let's see what we can do with this egg. You want to use room temperature eggs. And the reason you want to do that is because when you take them out of the refrigerator, if they are very cold, the wax will pop right back off. So I just start somewhere in the center of the egg vertically, and I'm going all the way around. If you need to use something like a rubber band for a guide or a template, you can order templates. They have them at the gift shop. They look like this. You could put one of these, for example, at the top of your egg, and you could use a pencil to mark off the line that you want. And I would suggest you do it very lightly because, again, we're not going to be erasing. What we will do, though, is cover it with dye that's very dark, probably. So you don't have to worry too much about that. But on your initial markings on a white egg, those lines will show up because, again, once you put the wax on, you're covering up whatever you're going to keep of that color. So if you marked on a white egg with pencil and then you cover it with dye to get your line, you'll see that pencil line. So that's one way to mark off your egg. Another way, I can't reach this, another way to make sure your line is fairly straight is to use a lathe. And how that works is you hold your Kiska to it and you turn the lathe while you are marking it with your wax. I tend to just hold it in my hand and try to stay steady. Just enjoy making lines. And so now I'm going to do my horizontal line. It looks like I'm going to be running out of wax here in a second, so I'm going to be adding more wax to my Kiska. And that's the process. You just hold it over the egg, hold it over the flame, and then right with your Kiska, and then you fill your Kiska with wax, hold it over the flame. And now I'm going to do a diagonal line in both directions. So I'm going to divide my egg into eighths. So I'm going to start at the center of this line that I did horizontally and vertically where they intersect, and I'm going to just cut that section in half. And now I've made a diagonal. And I'm going to keep going from there. I'm going to cross over the center of the other side, and I'm going to divide this section in half with my wax. And you can see, because this is the larger end of the egg, you might have to turn it just a little bit to get the shape that you want of that line. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So writing on my egg with this wax. And I'm going to come through that center and divide the other section in half the same way with that diagonal line. Okay, so now I've got a basic pattern. My egg is divided into eighths with horizontal and vertical line at first, and then the diagonal lines through the center. And now I have sections to work within. This is where it starts to get really fun. You can see that in each of these divisions, there are smaller lines. So one, you can see, looks like a little tent. And then it looks like they have a design here that looks like an evergreen branch. So you could start with just the tent. So let's do that. You can practice making a little tent if you'd like. It's just a little up and down line. Let's see. So you're going to do up and then down in each of the 8 sections and on both sides. And they're going to, and for those of you who do quilting, this is very much like piecing a quilt together. So there's my first tent. And I'm going to do that in each section. I'm going to try and make them match up as best I can. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. And what you're going to end up with in each section then is actually a diamond. A little bit more wax. So here's my first 2. And you can see that they are now shapes of diamonds within each section. And I'm going to do that all the way around my egg. So while I'm doing that, we'll take a small break and we'll come back. So as you can see, I've completed my diamond pattern. And now I'm going to do the next step that they've asked me to do, which is to put this evergreen pattern. And this is just basically inside each section where the line is, you're going to move your Kiska in short strokes along the line in the same direction as your diamond point. On either side of the line, just to make it looks like an evergreen branch. And we'll talk a little bit more about symbolism of these eggs. This craft predates Christianity, and so some of the things that you get are related to the rebirth of spring and the celebration of spring. And after Christianity, the symbols start to relate to more of the religious symbols of the crucifixion and the resurrection. So evergreens might represent, for example, everlasting life through the rebirth of spring, whereas after Christianity, it would represent everlasting life through the crucifixion and the rebirth of Christ. And you might have dots on your eggs that represent fertility. And later in post-Christianity, it might represent the tears of Mary. So it's an interesting history to learn about as well, what these eggs represented, and that they were given to each other as a gift to celebrate spring and to celebrate Easter. Colors are also important. You might imagine, for example, that in the Christian symbolism, purple would represent Christ, red, bloodshed, green, representing spring, and this is, again, pre-Christian, would represent the birth of spring and beautiful greens that come along. So I'm just putting these evergreen markings, and we'll take a little break while I do that. I've got my evergreen branches, and if you look very closely, you'll see that not anything about this is perfect, and it doesn't need to be. Your lines might not meet. They may be, you can see some of my triangles are larger than the other. It's nice when you get it exactly the same shape and it looks very perfect, but it doesn't have to be, and that's the beauty of this craft. You'll have a beautiful egg no matter what. I'm ready now to take that first egg that I started with that has been sitting in this yellow dye, out. And here's how I do it. I lift the spoon, and there's going to be dye sitting in the spoon in a pool. I don't want to take that out. I'm going to put the paper towel that I folded up on top of the egg, and I'm going to just gently lift the egg off the spoon. And you'll see there's a nice pool of dye. We don't want to waste it, so we'll just dump it back in. And I'm just going to gently pat my egg. And this turned out very nice. Sometimes the store-bought eggs are hard to get to be a nice yellow color. Interestingly, and this is what I mentioned earlier, some of the wax lines came off where the egg was still cold. I had just taken them out of the fridge. So you want to make sure your eggs are at room temperature. This one is now ready to go into the yellow dye, because this is actually the one that we're going to finish, but I wanted to show you while that one is soaking what a beginning egg is going to look like. And I'll do something with that. And we'll pause while the other egg is dyeing.
Okay.
So one of the eggs that I had dyed previously when we got started was in the light blue. So that's actually been sitting for quite a while. It's soaked up quite a lot of dye, and so it's a very vibrant blue. It doesn't look too light, but it's a good color for the purpose of what I want to show you. I have a straight pin, and there are actually tools that you can use for this, which I don't have, but I wanted to show you a different technique. You don't have to do this one, but if you had the right tools and you wanted to try this, this is another fun technique, and it involves just the one color. So I have used the one color for my egg, and I have a pin, dipped the egg in that color, patted it dry, and now I'm just going to take my pin, and this is a scratch method. This is a different method of egg decorating in the Ukrainians, and with the right tool it's much easier, but just to give you an idea of what it can look like, I'm just scratching the surface of the egg to make a pattern. And just what you're doing is you're scraping the dye back off basically and revealing the white egg underneath, or if you had a brown egg from the farmer's market, you'd be revealing the yellow brown underneath. And it's a very different look. And in fact, I have a book. Barry, if you'll hand me the book underneath. Is there one more? All the way at the bottom. So this is a book on many different techniques of decorating eggs. And just to show you, for example, here's a nice white egg with just one color. Same method, wax and dye. And more intricate for those of you, again, who like to quilt. There's some patterns that quilters might like. This is beautiful. Globe. So it's very fancy. And I'm gonna find one of the scratch method that I just showed you. This one is called well, this is a Japanese style. If you're still just getting the hang of the writing and filling your Kiska with wax and getting that sort of rhythm down, that's okay, because it just takes practice, and you'll get your own rhythm about, you know, how you hold the Kiska and how long it takes for that wax to melt. Pause it. I had to pull a picture up from the internet because none of my books had a picture of this type of egg. As you can see, my lines are very faint compared to these because there's a different tool to use. But these are the scratch method eggs. Different type of region, different region in Ukraine. And I'm also going to show you another type of egg. It's based on what's called Tropilian pottery. I'm assuming that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but somebody out there might correct me. And these are very beautiful designs that are based on Tropilian pottery. And basically browns and blacks and the whites of the egg. I'm also going to show you, again, if you decide to do this a different style, I have a wax melter that I've got some beeswax melting in. And this is another reason this straight pin comes in handy. If you want to work with children and don't want to use the open flame, you can use a wax burner like this, and pause it. So this method is called the drop pull method, and what you're basically doing is taking the pin head of a straight pin. You're going to put the pin into an eraser of a pencil, so you have a nice long tool to work with. You don't have to get near the wax. You dip the ball of the pin into the wax, you dot the egg, and then you pull. And you can make any patterns you want with this method. Great for kids to do because, again, you don't have an open flame and your tool is long enough that it's not close to the wax that's melting. And let me show you what that egg will start to look like as you do your wax and resist method. So there's the beginning of an egg. But this is one that I started long ago. And you can see that you can make all sorts of designs. And I've just taken, this looked like a white egg that I did my designs, and then I dipped it into a red. And I'll just show you what it looks like. Now, this is the final step in terms of once your egg is the pattern that you want and you have your finished color. In this case, my finished color is going to be red. I will hold the egg slightly away from the flame, so not directly in it, because once again, with the wax on the egg, if you put the egg directly into the flame, the carbon will burn the wax into a black soot onto your egg, and you don't want black soot lines that you can't get rid of on your egg. So I hold it to the side, and I just watch. When the wax starts to glisten, I'll know that it's shiny and glistening, and I'll know to wipe the egg very gently on a paper towel that I have close to me. And you just do that over and over again until the wax is melted off and you see your pattern. The other method for taking the wax off is to put your egg on a foil-lined cookie sheet. So I just take a small sheet, use a piece of foil, and you can use it over and over again. It's probably a 20-year-old piece of foil. Place your eggs on your cookie sheet into an oven that's about 200 degrees. So you just want to melt the wax off, and you just keep a very close eye on it. And when you see the egg glisten all over, it looks sort of like it's wet and shiny, you'll know that the wax is hot enough to buff off with a paper towel, and that's what you'll do. And you do that over and over again until all the wax is removed and your pattern is revealed. So I keep doing this one just a little bit to show you what's happening with this egg. This may have been a brown egg, but it's so old. It was one that I didn't finish. It's hard to know if it was white or brown. The other thing that's so nice about this craft is that the smell of the beeswax is glorious. And so it just takes you back to your, favorite moments of sharing this craft with others, or maybe you do it by yourself and just enjoy your time creating something beautiful and thinking about your faith. And it's also relatively easy because I have all my tools right here in front of me, and it's easy to make something without having to get up and go find things. I've got a couple dies, a cube of beeswax, my candle, some eggs, and my Kiska. And so it's relatively easy in that way. Our egg that's been soaking in the yellow is ready to come out and do the next step. So again, just lift the egg off the spoon, dump the dye, and gently pat this egg. And be aware that as we've been using the beeswax and we've been touching things, that we might get some oils on our fingers, so you can wipe your fingers off a little bit to keep from getting fingerprint smudges on the egg where the dye won't penetrate. So it looks like the next thing they are having us do is an outline of our star pattern. So that's what we'll do. If you get too much of a buildup of wax on your Kiska, hold it into the flame and just let some of it wipe off on your newspaper underneath. Move my egg back to a clean paper towel. And I'm going to make sure I've got some wax in there to work with. And what they want me to do is an outline of that diamond pattern. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just putting a line inside. We will be doing a different design later with that same outline. Make sure I got some wax in my Kiska. If you were really getting into this Ukrainian egg decorating, you might use different size Kiskas to make different size lines for these designs that you're making, but for today we're just sticking with the red because it makes a nice line that you can see. And as soon as I finish this design, it's going to go directly into the next color, and in this case I'm going to do pink. And you are welcome to do the pink, you're welcome to do the blue, but since you have just probably the three colors that you're working with, I would suggest that you do the pink. It's the next color in your lineup in terms of light to dark. And you're not going to leave it in very long because pink is pretty intense. You'll get the color that you need, so you don't need to do 5 minutes if you don't want to. And in fact, this is a fun thing to experiment with when you're making these eggs. A very short time soaking in the pink will give you a pretty coral color if you have used yellow. In fact, I'll show you what that looks like. It's fun. So this is the egg that I was working with earlier. I'm just going to dip it in and bring it right back out really fast. And so what I get, you can leave it in there as long as you like, but what I'm going to get with this is a little bit of a different color than what you might think. It starts to look a little bit like a coppery coral color. Whereas if I leave it in longer, and we're going to do that with this one, you're going to get a hot pink. And so in it goes. And we'll be back in a moment. Egg is out of the pink and ready for the next step. I'm just patting the excess dye off of it, and that I hope you can see the difference between the two. The one that I left in for just a few seconds with the yellow underneath, and the one that I left in longer. You can see there's a difference in those shades, and that's how you get your different shades as you work. Okay, the next thing that they want us to do is cover in each diamond alternating. So that's a fill-in space. So again, if you're using a larger tipped Kiska, you don't have as much work to do because you're filling in a space. If you're doing detailed lines, it's nice to have a fine line Kiska. So we're going to start with, it looks like this one. And I'm going to fill in one just to show you, and then we'll take a little break while I fill in the rest, and while you're doing that at home. So I'm just filling in all of that diamond, and I'm going to do every other one, and I'm going to do the same pattern on both sides. So as you can see, I've done the first diamond fill-in that they've asked me to do, and I have put my initials on the bottom and the date, 2021. That's the nice thing about these writing tools. They truly are for writing, so you can put words and your name and whatever else you want to put on there. The next step that I'm going to do, and this is something that you'll want to have handy, little Q-tips. I'm going to dip it into the blue dye and get some of the excess off. And then I'm going to take the tip of my Q-tip and dot each diamond at the top. And then I'm just going to use my paper towel to wipe away the excess if there is any. This is a different way to apply a color. And then I'm going to cover that. So it's a little bit different than what we've been doing, which is dipping the whole egg into the dye. This time I'm just going to cover the dot with the wax. I'm going to save it that sort of purplish blue. And while I do the rest, I'll let you work on your egg, and I'll be back in just a moment. So I'm putting wax on the last of my dots, and I will submerge it in the blue dye, and we'll check back in just a moment. All right, I'm taking this out of the blue dye, And I'm ready for the next step, which is to cover the rest of the diamond pattern on the inside of the egg. And it looks like they also are going to do the outer design that we marked off earlier. So it's a little outline of that diamond. It actually ends up being a star pattern. So the Kiska kits come with different numbers of dies. Some of them come with just the 3, the red, or the pink, the yellow, and the blue. And some of them come with 5. And one of the colors that's nice to have as a finishing color is black. And you'll see why in just a moment. I'm going to take a pause here while I continue to fill this in and while you continue to fill in your design. And we'll be right back. So I'm looking at my instructions and I'm looking at the number of dies that I have. They've actually used 5, but for the purpose of instruction, I'm going to stop with 4. And so I didn't do the pattern inside the diamonds that the evergreen leaves are going to pop out at the end. Mine are just going to be solid. That's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and put this in my finishing die, which is black. And again, the darkest colors are your finishing colors. So think things like black, royal blue, purple, turquoise, deep red. Those are the colors that you're not going to be able to dye over, but they make a nice background color. This is a pattern just using red and a brown egg. And so you can see that red is a predominant color in Ukrainian egg decorating. I'm not leaving this in very long. It doesn't need to be in there very long for the purpose of showing you what the finished product is going to look like. And this is where the fun really begins. Not that the rest of it wasn't. It doesn't take much time in the black, but again, you can leave it in anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes to really get the color that you want, the saturation that you want. And then I'm going to start to do the melting off process. Now, I will tell you how to blow out this egg, although I'm not going to do it. If I were going to blow this egg out, I would fill my Kiska with wax. I would then turn it upside down so that the funnel pours wax all over each end of the egg, about a quarter size diameter of wax, because what you're going to be doing is putting your lips up to the egg and blowing it out. You're going to use a pin to start with to poke a hole, or you can use a nail, small finishing nail. You're going to poke a hole in each end after you've got your blob of wax, and you're going to use that pin to try and break up the yolk if you can, or you can shake the egg a little bit, use a nail, finishing nail, get in there and break the egg. Then the yolk, not the shell. And then you're going to put your lips to the egg and blow it out, and it should come right out the bottom. You hold it over a trash can and it'll come right out the bottom. If you want to leave it intact, you can. And this is what you're going to do. Again, you're going to hold the egg to the side of the flame. You don't want to put it directly into the flame because the carbon will burn black onto your pretty egg colors. So I'm just going to hold it to the side, and when it starts to glisten, I'll know to wipe the wax off, and you'll just repeat that process several times until the wax is completely off. If you get a thick layer of wax, it might take a few minutes to start to see the pattern emerge. This one's not going to come off too easily. There we go. And if you're working with children, this is a step you really want to supervise. You don't want little burnt fingers. And the egg will get warm, so if you hold the egg too long in one place, you'll need to set it down for a minute to let it cool off so that you can get back to melting the wax off. This is going to be so pretty. I sound like Martha Stewart. For those of you who know me well and know that I like to do impersonations of people like Julia Child when we're cooking, I'd be doing my impression of Martha Stewart, and she'd be talking and saying, "This is just going to turn out so lovely." She's crafty in that way. And if she were working today with Julia Child, Julia would want to scramble these up, but she'd make them into some lovely little omelet. But don't, because as we said, these eggs are dyed now with a chemical-based dye that will, I don't know that they're toxic, but you don't want to eat them. And the dyes really do get inside the egg. Sometimes they'll absorb into the porous shell. So when you blow your egg out, you'll see all kinds of colors coming out of your egg. And the final step, after melting all the wax, like we said, if you want to put a dot of varnish on your egg to make those colors really pop out, and then you would set it in a drying rack. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. So it's just gently wiping away the wax as it melts and revealing your beautiful patterns. So you might see on an egg triangles that represent the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You might see animal designs like horns and deer horns and birds, prosperity, but also it could represent in Christianity the dove of peace. You might see a shape of a ladder, and that could be Jacob's ladder, the connection between heaven and earth. There are around the center of the egg, vertically or horizontally, all the way around the egg, you might see what look like ocean waves. It could represent eternity. So it might be a design that continues around the egg in an infinite pattern. So thus the connection with eternity. If you're very crafty, you can make your own dyes the old-fashioned way by using things like onion skins that you've boiled to get yellows and reds. Beets, soot from your fireplace will make a nice charcoal gray or black, depending on how you use it. berries for blues and purples and reds. And if you have a friend like I do who is a beekeeper, you can get yourself a nice chunk of wax. And this egg is almost revealed. So we'll pause while I finish this up and I'll show you my finished product. So for the very last step, if you decide to use the polyurethane varnish, or if you use a spray varnish, you won't have to do this piece, but you should wear a glove, put a couple dots of the varnish on your fingers and just massage it all over the egg. And then you're going to leave it to dry overnight. You can take a board and just tap 3 nails to give you a support, or you can set it on something that'll keep it just up off of a lot of paper. You don't want it to stick, but you're just going to set your egg to dry. But that's the outcome of our process. And as you can see, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. And I think that's what God asks of us anyway. We're not perfect, we're good enough and beautiful. I hope you really enjoyed this process as much as I have, and I hope you treasure being able to do a craft like this with the people that you love, or on your own, in your own solitude. Either way, enjoy and have a very happy Easter. Bye-bye.